Welcome to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Devotions designed to inspire you on your daily walk with God. Here's your host, Ken Gurley.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Devotion. Happy that you are here. Let's look back. Heather Babineau, first on YouTube. Linda Thornburg, first on Facebook. Yes, so happy you're here. What a beautiful day. Thursday, March the 10th. Just believing God for some amazing things happening today. And for each of you, may the Lord bless our Morning Devotion family. These devotees, one of you sent me a coffee cup with the Morning Devotion. I need to bring it home where you can, and then I can have an excuse to have coffee just like you're doing, because I would be using my Morning Devotion mug. See, I'd be plugging. That's it. A plug with a mug for Morning Devotion. That's it. That's it. So good to see you. Hey, Brother Scott, or Brumley, it's good to see each of you. Angie, happy to see you. Thankful for what God is doing in our moment, even in this pivotal day, even in this difficult day. The Lord is at work. You're going to want to share this today. Yes, you are. You're going to want to share this. If you've never subscribed to the page, do so. Follow the page, like it. I couldn't get away from this. I mean, I was awakened super early this morning. Not even by the alarm clock. Just woke up. This thought was on my mind. I had planned something so different for today. But I'm just going to let the thought emerge, and maybe it's for someone. Maybe it will help someone. Maybe it will awaken someone this weekend coming up, that we're going to arbitrarily change time and move forward an hour. Yes, we can do that, I guess. I wish they would leave it alone, but that's another story. I want to talk about prophecy unfolding. Where? A specific question. I'm always asked, where is the United States? And I'm going to give you the likeliest place that you're going to find the United States in prophecy. And I think you'll be blessed. So let's get to it. Glenn, Robin, thank you. Daryl, just lift up one another in prayers today. How we need that. Let's stay together, and let's see what God has for us today. It's been some time since I've spoken about prophecy on Morning Devotion, and there's a reason for that. It's a subject that naturally draws me. If left to my own devices, especially in my early years in ministry, I'd probably end up talking about it all the time. And so I'm very careful. Paul told the church of Ephesus that he did not neglect to declare the whole counsel of God, that it's our job to declare the whole counsel of God. And so while I would love naturally to talk about prophecy, I don't do it that often. There's so many other things to discuss, life-changing, life-sustaining subjects. Prophecy has also been a point of contention. I've never spoken on prophecy that someone doesn't disagree with me. I've never heard someone speak about prophecy that I haven't disagreed with them. There may be another reason to avoid it, right? We see through a glass darkly. No one has a corner on truth with prophecy. There are just too many things hidden from our eyes, only to be revealed when God says, now's the time. Now's when I want you to know it. In fact, it's so common for prophetic views to be wrong that I suspect when it all unfolds, probably none of us will have been completely infallible in this area. Yet, when we read Revelation, it's the only book of the Bible that there is a blessing pronounced to those who read the words of Revelation. Read this prophetic apocalypse, this unfolding of the Lord Jesus Christ. There is a blessing to prophecy. We comfort one another with these words, and that's what I want to do today. Prophecy now unfolds. Let's hit this tough question we always hear. Where is the United States in prophecy? Amelia, let's tackle that. And Ronald, let's tackle it. Let's see. Where's the United States in prophecy? If prophecy is unfolding, this panorama before our very eyes. We need to know. I mean, maybe everybody in any country of the world asks that question, where's their country in prophecy? But in the United States, I guess we're more prone to ask that as a world superpower, to just seemingly be absolutely missing in the writings of Scripture about the future. What does that mean? Even now, even now, we start to see the unusual happening. Have you heard that Israel's prime minister is meeting with the Russian president, trying to broker a ceasefire? How odd is that? That Russia and China have formed some sort of alliance? How prophetic is that? That the old Roman Empire rattling in the present European Union, it's starting to get unusual. And then while all that happened in Iran, ancient Persia is trying to join the nuclear weapon club. We live in perilous times, difficult times. I read an article a few years back called Too Close to the Rapture, question mark. Too close to the rapture. Almost like standing so close to a forest, you don't see the forest, you see the individual trees. The author's point in this article is that in the 40s and the 50s of the last century, people saw Israel becoming a state. After 1900 years of dormancy, there was a widespread belief that Jesus was coming soon. It affected lifestyles, it affected doctrine, changed minds during the 60s and 70s. In the dramatic wars in Israel, people were so convinced that Jesus was coming that they raced to the church in droves. For the past 20 years or so, we've not seen that. I think prophecy took on a whole new meaning when the pandemic hit a couple of years ago. People began to wonder and worry about the mark of the beast, everything. But I think they missed the point. What was evident during the pandemic was there was an alliance of nations marching lockstep, decreasing liberties. They were bent and still are on forming a reset of the economy and the world governance. We also saw a decline of America in the world. That article, Is the Rapture Too Close, suggests we may be so close to our Lord's return that we're losing sight of it. We're just too close. Debbie, we're close. Lance, I believe we're close. Jesus said, our day, it's going to be like no other day. Sorrows, woes, tribulation multiplied like no day before, no day since. He said kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation, wars, rumors of wars. We're there, folks. We're just there. But are we so close to the rapture that we've lost sight of it? Mike, Yvonne, Richard, I want to be ready. I want to be ready. In such an hour as we think not. Then the Son of Man cometh. I want to be ready. Yes, that's why I said at the beginning, you're going to want to share this because there are people getting ready to make a decision to return to the Lord. And maybe this will be that final piece of straw, that final snowflake that will bring that avalanche of repentance. Oh, I believe that. The Bible is remarkable in its presentation of nations mentioned in the last day prophecy. Even today, from those ancient names given in the Bible, we can figure out the modern nations attached to them. We've mentioned Israel, but what other nations are mentioned in the Bible, especially in the end time? If you turn to Ezekiel 38, I think you're going to see something. It's called the battle, we call it the Battle of Gog and Magog. It's said to happen in latter years, last days. A lot of theories about exactly when it's going to happen. But you have a list of nations in the conflict. And some ally and attack Israel, some do not. They will come like a cloud to cover the land. Why will it happen? Ezekiel said at the time they will come with a collective mind, an evil thought. Let's go spoil Israel. Who will go up in that time? This is where it gets really intriguing. I'm going to go through these list of nations. Is that all right? And how many of you know that a picture is worth 1,000 words? Lonnie, Winnie, do you know that? So I'm going to throw a little picture up. Let's see if we can get this here. Okay. Gog is in the land of Magog. It's formed of the princes of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal. This is what Ezekiel 38 says. Finding some old names mentioned here, they trace back to Genesis 11 to one of the three sons of Noah, Japheth. They were the descendants of the father of the so-called European nations. Yet they were not altogether what we would consider today to be European. Herodotus, the 5th century BC scholar, identified these people as being Muscovites living in northern Asia Minor. Josephus described these people as those who live over the Caucasus Mountains. Pliny, a Roman writer dating to early Christian era, once identified Magog with what we would call present-day Russia. That great wall of China is still called in places the Wall of Magog, put there to protect against the northern and the Russian masses. The name Moscow is said to be derived from the tribal name of Meshach. The word chief used by Ezekiel is Rosh. It's what Byzantine and Arabic writers called the people who inhabit present-day Russia. Rosh was the name of the northern tribes about the Volga River. Magog is the country. Gog is its leader. So we believe that Russia is the biblical Magog. Its prince, its leader, is called Gog. It's clear that Russia will one day attack Israel. In fact, some say not once, but 2 or 3 times. Why will they attack? Well, that's a curious question. Possible reasons for Russia's attack on Israel: long-term anti-Semitism, economic gain. Ezekiel 38 seems to suggest that. A security concern. And then also Ezekiel 39, it just seems to be that God draws these people into conflict. You see, our focus is on Ukraine today. We see the loss of life, and it concerns us. And Catherine, Debbie, we see it, we say, how? How is this allowed to happen? How is this allowed to go on? Today's American, I wish we knew more about history, but we view Hitler as the greater evil over Stalin. Indeed, the Holocaust was like nothing else, and no evil committed by Stalin should seek to minimize what Hitler did. We will never forget. That's the mantra of the Holocaust. But what we also forget in the midst of that atrocity is that Stalin killed a whole lot of people. It's called the Holodomor, the unintended or intended consequence of Soviet planting and agricultural policy. Killed anywhere from 7 to 10 million Ukrainians. Starved to death. Yeah, those Ukrainians fighting today, they remember. They know why they're fighting. They know the cruelty of it all. They will not forget either. So when we look through the postmodern lens at Ukraine today and say what we're seeing, the maternity ward hit by shells, and we say it's so shocking, it's only a dim reflection of the genocide that existed and that was prompted by Russia in the 30s. Viciousness, tyranny. And what you can also see is what's happening now. And what happened back then is probably what will happen in the future. You're going to see how the United States, marginalized in today's conflict, it's a hint. It's a harbinger, a foreshadowing of where we will be in the prophetic time, the battle of Gog and Magog. But the United States will be on the sidelines, destroyed from within. I don't like saying that. I'm believing God for an awakening. Trenton, I'm believing God for awakening. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Here's what God said. I will put hooks in the jaws of Magog and turn the Russian army toward Israel. Turn it toward Israel. This is why some are concerned about the marching on Ukraine, is there could come a turn. As Egypt of old was drawn into the Red Sea, Russia will be drawn into conflict that will turn into a sea of blood. Gog, the prince of Russia, Magog, will lead the confederacy of nations. And what ancient nations they are. Look at the map over here. Persia, that's Iran. Cush, Ethiopia, Sudan. Gog is called the king of the north. And the head of these nations, Daniel 11, is called the king of the south. Notice how Israel's being crunched on all sides. Then there's Put. That's Libya. It could include uh, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco as well. Then there's Gomer. Look up in Europe and you see Gomer. Gomer, that eldest son of Japheth in the European nation. He and his sons settled north of the Black Sea and spread south and westward across Europe. Today's Jews call one country Gomer, and that's Germany, which could include the whole of Eastern Europe as well. Is this interesting to you? It's interesting to me that this was prophesied way back in Ezekiel 38. Then we read of the house of Tagarma of the north quarters. That would be Turkey, the tribes of Central Asia, all on horseback. Wasn't it interesting at the beginning of the U.S. offensive, the Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, that many of the troops were relegated to horseback? That's still the greatest method of maneuvering in the terrain between Russia and Israel was horseback. God's drawing this massive confederacy against Israel. And then Ezekiel said, I've not listed all the allies. There are many people with thee. It's kind of unusual to me that all the nations mentioned in this list thus far. Do you know that today these nations are presently focused against Israel? Anti-Semitism is a huge issue. Does that give us reason for concern? 2,500 years ago, Ezekiel described this swarming cloud of opposition to come against Israel. Let me mention one other curious thing before we move on to where is the United States in prophecy. And that's the Islam connection of these nations. Notice that most of Russia's allies in the march against Israel are from Islamic nations. Maybe that's the most likely place then to begin to find the United States in Ezekiel 38. And it's we would call it, it's verse 13. I want you to notice this. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all the young lions thereof shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? This group of nations are saying, what's the deal? Why are you doing this? Why have you they have a non-intervention policy. Does this sound familiar? Russia's on the march. And why are you doing this? We don't understand. We can't intervene. We won't intervene. Who are these nations? Well, Sheba and Dedan, that's easy to identify. They're cities in present-day Saudi Arabia. They're not part of the invasion of Israel. Rather, they question Magog and say, why are you doing this? Saudi Arabia has been the most faithful Arab ally to the United States in the region. One of the reasons is that this country has control over two of the holiest sites of Islam, Mecca and Medina. They want those preserved and protected. The United States and the West is a valuable consumer of their oil. So Saudi Arabia is not joining with this confederacy. And then the merchants of Tarshish. In biblical genealogy, Tarshish was the brother of Magog, both sons of Japheth. It's believed the merchants of Tarshish are the Western European nations. For centuries, the merchants of Tarshish were connected with seafarers, Spain, Holland, Britain, Portugal. Yes. You remember when Jonah was going to run from God, he boarded a ship bound for Tarshish, the farthest journey imaginable in those days. Yes, going to Tarshish. Tarshish was a place where tin was mined and exported, and Britannia means a source of tin. Tarshish, with all of its lines. Look at this advertisement, this appeal in World War I, that the old lion is calling for the young lions. Yes, Tarshish with all the young lions. And Great Britain called for Australia, India, Canada, New Zealand, calling for the young lions. These transatlantic colonies from these seafaring nations of Spain, Holland, Great Britain, France that found and populated new worlds. This is most likely where you'll find the United States in the young lions category, the colonies of Western Europe. The United States has always stood shoulder to shoulder with Western Europe in the First World War, Second World War, Korean, conflict, Gulf War. Canada, Australia, the United States, France, Spain stood together. What will this Western confederacy of nations do when Magog and its allies attack Israel? What will they do? Will they attack? No, it's diplomacy. What are you doing here? Why are you intervening? That's what Ezekiel said they will ask. They did nothing to stop her, and Israel stands alone. Even Great Britain and the United States will not run to her assistance. No, they stand on the sidelines. Does this sound very familiar to our day right now? Stand on the sidelines while destruction mounts. Why are you here? Why have you gathered together in company to take prey, to take silver and gold and cattle and goods and to take spoil? Do you see it? Morning devotion, Zane, Barbara, Lawanda, do you see it? Do you see the fulfillment of prophecy before your very eyes? Western nations paralyzed as Russia mows and plows into Ukraine. What happened in the previous century with the loss of millions of Ukrainians at Russian hands. Here we go again. Maybe not that scale, but we see it. And in the end time, the Western Gentile nations will sit back and play politics and will try what Neville Chamberlain did with Hitler. No. And Israel will stand alone. But oh, hear me carefully. Oh my, Israel has a great shepherd. He brought them back to their ancient homeland. The great shepherd is going to show up in the last day. And we read that he will deliver Israel from her devour, the fury. You read of a fierce earthquake in Ezekiel 38. 3 times in Revelation do we read of earthquakes. Revelations 6, 11, and 16. God shakes the earth, and that northern army is immobilized. Then we read in verse 21 of Ezekiel 38 that the sword of the Lord comes. Oh, the sword of the Lord. Yeah, isn't that what Gideon said? This is the sword of the Lord in an outmatched battle against the Midianites. Back then, the enemy got so confused, they fought one another. The confederacy of Magog under its ruler, Gog, will start attacking one another, the sword of the Lord. Then in verse 22 of Ezekiel 38, we read of plagues, cholera, smallpox, diphtheria, spread by hand-to-hand combat. Survive the battle you may, but you'll perish in the plague. Then we read of heavenly attacks in verse 22. Usually that's hailstone, torrents of rain, burning sulfur plummeting on the truth. It will take Israel 7 months to bury the dead. The war material will be used for fuel for 7 years. Folks, we're not simply members of the United States. You and I have to decide of which nation are we. People are so proud of their nation, and I don't fault that. I love to see people proud of their nation. We Americans have a lot to be proud of. We've got a lot to be embarrassed about. Not only have we sent out the gospel, but our nation has exported more filth than any other nation in the world. Righteousness does exalt a nation, and to whom much is given, much is required. God's going to require much of this nation. But as great as America is, by the start of the rapture, she will not rise to protect Israel. Why? Has she been so weakened? Has she sided with other nations for economic interests so long that she can't stand for righteousness? Will mammon finally convert the hearts once given over to God? Yes, it could be. One day, even America will turn a deaf ear to the cry of Israel. And woe to America when that day comes, because then it will be God and God alone who protects Israel. But again, I say there's only 2 nations, really. You and I are either a citizen of this world or we are a citizen of heaven. We're one of those first. We're either a citizen of the world first or a citizen of heaven first. Choose to be a citizen. Our citizenship, Paul says, in heaven. And if you will make your citizenship in heaven, you have a role to play. We've got the gospel to preach. We've got to convert as many as possible. got to see the power of God on display. We have to carry people from earth to glory and point the way. So who's on the Lord's side? When you see this confederacy of nations, one following Magog to attack Israel, one involving Western Europe and the young lions stretched across the globe, sitting back, trying diplomacy. Which side are you on? I want to be on the Lord's side. That's where the United States is in prophecy. At least that's my best guess, the passage of where we would find the United States. But right now, why don't we be converted to be a citizen of heaven? This world is not our home. Can I get a witness to that? Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Vicki. Share this with as many people as possible. And I don't know why I felt that today. I just really felt that. Maybe today's the day somebody's going to turn their heart back toward home. Pandemic didn't convince them. The riots, the conspiracy theories haven't convinced them. Maybe what's happening with Russia invading Ukraine, maybe they can see a precursor to what a great battle is going to be. And it's coming and coming soon. I want to be ready. I want to be a citizen of another world. God bless you. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow morning. May the Lord be with you.
Thank you for listening to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Join us next time for another inspiring devotion. To support this ministry, please visit firstchurch.com/give.